Professor Huang. I'm very honored to invite you to our program of The Economist Thoughts to talk about your insight into the platform economy, which is also the key concept in your new book. So can you give us a very brief introduction of platform economy, since I think a lot of people may not be very familiar with this topic?
Generally speaking, platform economy can be defined as a new business model built on the digital infrastructure such as internet, cloud computing, and mobile terminal. But it also applies some digital technologies like blockchain, big data analysis, and machine learning approach, and so on. In fact, platform economy is already in our daily lives. Online shopping is one very good example of the platform business. Another example is the ByteDance. We watch short videos on the internet. And also we do social media, such as WeChat and so on. So it's relatively new. China started to build these platforms from around mid-1990s.
After more than 20 years development, China has already taken the leads in the world in the platform economy sector. So what do you think are the key factors for China's success in this sector?
One key element is what we call the smartphones, mobile terminals. If you didn't have mobile phones, smartphones, it's very difficult to establish a very extensive network. The first factor I always would want to point to is market-oriented reform. In fact, they're created by a bunch of very young people. They have new ideas and they're able to build these gigantic companies within a very short period. That is a result of market-oriented reform. The second reason, which is also very important, is we have a relatively advanced digital infrastructure. China's penetration rate in both smartphones and in internet quite high compared to other developing countries. And I think that is in part because the government invests lots of money in this digital infrastructure. We also benefit from a very large population because the platform companies benefit from so-called scale economy. If you don't have enough market scale, it's very difficult to try new things.
So what kind of role do you think platform economy will play in coordinating COVID-19 responses as well as the economic and social development?
Well, I think the platforms actually played important roles in stabilizing the economy, controlling the pandemic. For instance, now we use the digital technology to identify the new cases and prevent spreading of the pandemic. Most importantly, I think most of the activities on the platforms have a key feature of contact-free or contactless activities. This effectively allows some activities to continue. One of the good examples that international organizations like IMF discovered that in 2020, when all countries were affected by the pandemic, but China's online lending continued, even though the pandemic affected the movement of people and a lot of offline banks were shut down. These banks continue to extend loans to SMEs, to the individuals, and so on. So I think this is just one very good example.
We've found that in recent years, Chinese government has imposed several punishments on the internet industries, internet companies for their violations of certain rules, such as Didi was fined over 8 billion yuan last month. And so what kind of problems do you think the platform economy is facing in recent years?
While these features of the platform economies bring a lot of benefits to the economy, they also create new challenges. So for instance, the scope economy and the scale economy, and sometimes basically means the bigger the better. The downside is if you become too big, there is a risk of what we call winner takes all. And so the worry about the monopoly, that's something I think. The same thing happened in the platform. For instance, the platforms actually created lots of what we call flexible jobs. So that's the positive side. But there is also downside. The working conditions of these flexible workers are not ideal and people complaining about it. There's also even worse problem. We don't have appropriate social security protection for these people. And these things need to be improved. And there is also a bigger issue of the individual privacy being sufficiently protected or not. So my understanding is that the new regulations, the policy instruments introduced, including the punishment you just mentioned, were part of the efforts trying to regulate the platform activities, trying to minimize the negative effects of the sector, but also to support the innovation.
Right now, the platform economy is stepping into a stage where the strict regulation is needed. So what specific regulations do you think the platform economy should be imposed on? Yeah. And what is the purpose of these regulations?
As you said, from the beginning of 2021, the platform economy entered a period of what you just called the strict regulation. Our sense is that we probably should avoid using strong or strict regulation, because regulation should be a routine, ongoing process. Because the reason why you want a regulation is you want them to behave more properly. Perhaps the turning point in terms of the Politburo meeting actually occurred on the 29th of April. At that meeting, the Politburo decided that the special regulatory action should end, and we should shift toward a more routine type of regulation, and that was the key outcome of that meeting. And that meeting also announced that we should design policies continue to support innovation in the platform economy. So what we needed to do in the process is trying to strike a balance between regulation and innovation. So we want them to behave properly, but we also want them to preserve their capability of innovation. So for instance, big data is a very important part of the platform economy. We should allow the platforms to utilize the big data analysis, but then we should also set a number of conditions or constraints. They should never invade the individual privacy. They should protect national security and so on. Then we should give the platforms enough freedom to utilize the big data. So the regulators and the platforms should actually work together, trying to find out what is the best.
So it reminds me of the Political Bureau meeting held on July 28th, emphasized that we should introduce some green light cases to the platform economy. So what do the green light cases refer to?
I don't know exactly what green light areas is, but I can imagine these are the areas where the government want to encourage the platform economy to develop. So things like supporting the consumption, supporting economic activities, supporting innovation, and so on. These are all the areas the government would encourage.
Thank you for sharing with us your thoughts on the platform economy and also the ways of ensuring economic development. Thank you.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.